girls and boys, welcome back to another Science Fun in My Kitchen. I'm Grandma Books, and today we're going to talk more about some famous engineers in the past. Now, you know, 3 months ago, my sweet potato just started spouting, and part of it broke off because it got so big, and I forgot to water it, and look, it's getting all limp. Now, I put water on it this morning, so it'll come back to life. See, the roots are getting really big. I might start another sweet potato, and you know, I told you about all the wonderful engineers down in the southern part of Mexico that grew things thousands of years ago, especially chocolate, and the Olmecs that lived in what's now Veracruz area of Mexico had chocolate 4,000 years ago. Isn't that amazing? Thank you, Olmecs. So boys and girls, the Olmecs were also great engineers in building things. They built pyramids. And most amazing, there are now 17 heads that they carved, gigantic heads down in the Veracruz area of Mexico. And I was lucky enough to once to walk around 3 of these heads. There's 17 total. And they were taller than I am. Some of these heads are 9 feet tall. That's tall. And they weigh as much as 5 or 10 automobiles. And this is amazing. The big rocks they carved these heads out of, they were gigantic. They came from 90 miles away. Now, there were no bulldozers. This was thousands of years ago. There were no bulldozers. They didn't even have horses in Mexico until the Spanish came. So how did they move these gigantic rocks 90 miles? Well, we don't know for sure, but we think that they were smart engineers and they invented simple tools. And one of the simple tools they probably used is a lever. Now, you know what a lever is, boys and girls, because you've been on a seesaw. Now, on a seesaw, if you are on one end and your friend's on the other end, you can balance. But what if 2 friends get on the other end? What happens? Then you know what happens. You go up in the air and they stay down. No, if you move your 2 friends, I'm going to show you this with Hershey Kisses. If you move your 2 friends so that you're farther away from the balance point, you can balance 2 people. And that's how levers work. Anything that uses the advantage of length to move things or to add extra force is a lever. Now, for instance, I'm going to show you how I think they maybe were able to lift these big rocks. If you take up, now they didn't have screwdrivers like I do, but they probably had trees and maybe they cut down a palm tree. And if you have a balance point here and you're putting force back here, look how much force you can move. You can move big objects that way. So we think they probably did that. Now, you know, you're not going to use this little screwdriver because you can't put force on because it's not long enough. It's like the Hershey Kisses. You've got to be far back. The farther back you are from the balance point, the more weight that you can put on. You can really put a lot of force in. So we're not sure, but we think the way that they were able to move these gigantic rocks 90 miles is they probably cut down a lot of trees, probably palm trees because they're nice and round, and then they just rolled them down. And you see, you can do that, and then you just keep moving the trees so that you can keep going, and you can move these rocks a long way. And then probably they also had water, and they used water to float them down. So boys and girls, the Olmecs were not the only really great engineers in what's now Mexico. Outside of Mexico City, there's this fantastic area of ruins called Teotihuacan. And there, we don't know who the people were. They built this huge city. They probably had over 100,000 people living there. Can you imagine that? And this was way before the Aztecs came into that area of Mexico. And we see these beautiful ruins. I walked up these ruins also, and you wonder, how did they get the big rocks up to the top of the ruin? We think they probably used ramps. Now let's look. Suppose you had this big rock and you had to get it up to the top of the pyramid. Do you want to lift it up, or do you want to slide it up a ramp? Well, obviously you'd want to slide it up the ramp because that's a lot easier. You can pull it, you have people pushing and people pulling. Now, how long do you want the ramp? Well, it's pretty obvious that it's easier to go up a long ramp, so it's gradual, than it is a steep ramp. So what if I now take my Dr. Seuss book, Dr. Seuss, and I want to lift this rock up? This is a lot harder to do. It's like, if you had to climb up to the top of a building, would you want to climb up a ladder? Would you want to walk upstairs, or would you want to go up a ramp? And if you were going up a ramp, wouldn't you want it to be a long ramp instead of a short ramp? So boys and girls, probably the best engineers and scientists and mathematicians in the old days in Mexico were the Mayans. They were really amazing. Now, you know, our number of counting is based upon tens. And that's probably because back when people discovered they were going to set up a way to add, they looked down and they had 10 fingers. Well, the Mayans set up a system of 20. And I think the reason is it was probably really warm in southern Mexico, and they didn't have to wear shoes, or they wore sandals. And so they looked down and they had 10 fingers and they had 10 toes, and they said, oh, well, we're going to set our number basis of 20. So I think that's just amazing. And we think that they are the first people in the whole world to come up with the concept of zero, because they had a drawing that they had in their carvings of a shell, and the shell stood for zero, and that's how they used in their mathematical system. The Mayans were also great scientists. They had observatories and big temples and pyramids. They built big structures. They observed the skies. They knew all about the stars and the moon and the sun, and they were just really brilliant people. Now, these pictures show a beautiful pyramid in Yucatan Peninsula, and I walked up to the top of this pyramid, and this is what's amazing. They had 3 calendars in the Mayan system. One of them had 365 days. That's exactly what we have in our calendar. And if you walk up this pyramid, you can't do it anymore, but I walked up it once about 50 years ago. It had exactly 365 steps. Isn't that amazing? What do I want to say next? Oh, okay. Now you remember, boys and girls, back in episode 6, we saw how strong eggs are. If you haven't seen episode 6, go see it, because my great-granddaughter walked on eggs. They're very strong. And so engineers all over the world said, if an egg is strong, they must have had eggs everywhere, I bet we could build arches, and they would have the same shape as an egg. And sure enough, look at these pictures of arches that the Mayans used, because arch is a very strong shape. If you ever have a chance to go to southern Mexico, I hope that you'll visit all of these fabulous ruins. It's just amazing to see all of these. Look at these beautiful buildings. They were just amazing. Amazing builders and amazing engineers. Girls and boys, there were some brilliant engineers in China in the old days. They invented firecrackers. So on the 4th of July, when we look out at these beautiful fireworks, I want you to think of the Chinese. They also invented gunpowder, and they built the first rockets in the whole world. And you know, our rockets that we have today run on the same principle theirs did. There's this law of science that says if there's a force going this direction, there's an equal and opposite force going in that direction. For instance, if you blow up a balloon, and if you let the balloon go, the air is going out of the balloon, so the balloon has to fly the other way. So I'm going to show you my stomp rocket. And you can build one of these actually with a plastic pop bottle. You ready for launch? So the engineering principle behind the Chinese rockets are the same thing we used in the United States when we sent the astronauts to the moon. Remember that? When the Apollo rockets launched off, the fire came out one end and the rocket went the other direction. So, girls and boys, we also have had some brilliant engineers in the United States, not only to get the astronauts to the moon and back, but over 100 years ago, the Wright brothers flew the first airplane in the whole world. Now, there's a law of science that explains how airplanes fly, and I'm going to show you this. This is a good thing for you to show your mom and dad, because they won't know this. Probably your teachers don't know this either. There's a law of science that was discovered 1,000 years ago that says if air is going fast, it doesn't exert as much pressure as if air is going slow. If you don't remember much about gases, go back and look at episode 1, gas, and then you'll understand this. So if you can get air to go fast, it doesn't exert much pressure. Now I'm going to show you how an airplane lifts up off the runway. You take a piece of paper like this, and you hold it right under your lower lip, right like this. And then you blow really hard over the top of it, like this. Do you see? I'm blowing air over the top of the paper, so the air is going faster. It doesn't have as much pressure. The air under the paper has more pressure. It pushes the paper up. That's exactly how an airplane goes down the runway and takes off. Because the wing of an airplane is designed so that the air will go faster over the top. Why? Because it has to go a farther distance. The wing is shaped so that it goes farther over the top than it does on the underneath. That means the pressure underneath is higher. It lifts the plane up in the air. Isn't that amazing? You think that's amazing. Wait till you hear this. The same law of science that explains why an airplane can lift off the ground explains how a pitcher can throw a curveball. Now I had to go online and get a picture of this because I played softball, but I didn't play baseball. But make sure I can hold this right. It's something like this. A baseball pitcher holds the ball about like this, and he throws it with a spin so that the air is going at a different speed on one side of the ball than the other. And it's the opposite of the plane, because in this case you want the ball to curve down when it gets to the plate. And so what happens is the pitcher throws a spin on it, puts a spin on the ball so that the air on the top of the ball is going slower, and that way it has more pressure and it pushes the ball down as it gets to the batter. I think that's just amazing that the same rule of science that tells a pitcher how to throw a curveball tells a designer how to build an airplane. So if you go online, you can learn how to build really great planes. I think you'll really enjoy this. This one does loop-de-loops. And my helicopter, you know, a helicopter is like a hummingbird. A helicopter can stop and stay in one place, or it can fly backwards, just like a hummingbird. And so if you watch birds, you'll learn a lot about airplanes and helicopters. So, girls and boys, I hope you've enjoyed all 7 episodes of Science Fun in My Kitchen. Go back and look at them again if you want to be a scientist, because you might learn something if the second time around. And I really appreciate that you've given me your time, and I hope you've learned to love science and started to look around you at all the amazing things that are going on in our world. And you know, if your mom and dad encourage you, go online and look at all these things that you can check out on science and engineering. And you know, you might think about studying math and science and becoming an engineer or a scientist yourself. If your abuela came from Mexico, you've probably got what it takes to be a great engineer or scientist just like the Mayans. Or if your ancestors came from China, or if they came from the United States. Look at all of the history we have of great engineers and scientists. So I hope that you will do, and you know, boys and girls, some people think that you have to be a brain to study math and science. They are difficult, but you know, I had a great career in designing rockets and airplanes, and I was never the best student in my class. Sometimes I got good grades, and sometimes I got really bad grades. But I stuck it out, I didn't give up, and I was able to become an engineer. So I hope you will do that. So I want to show you a picture of Mia. She's been doing all my filming and editing, and she's going to be a brilliant film editor someday, or which she probably already is. And so thank you, Mia. Thank you so much, and enjoy your life.